All right, we're live and ready, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, sounds good. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. It's the meeting of the Seldovia City Council, Monday, March 10th, 2025. Time is 4:35 p.m. This is a work session, and the main topic for discussion tonight is the FY26 budget for water and sewer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we do have visitors with us this evening. We have Rebecca Ryan and Gabriel Gonzalez with our RUBA program. That's the Rural Utility Business Advisory. They're our local government specialists. Rebecca was here last year, July, and started performing or working on a utility rate study for us. You'll see that as a supplemental in your email as well as on the website. And we'll let her start with that discussion on that, what she found during that rate study, and then we can move on to some more specific discussion about water and sewer once we get through that presentation.
All right. Thank you very much, Heidi. And thank you to the council for having us out to discuss this with you. So I was here last July and I worked with Radzi and Jan and Heidi, and I collected the data for what your totals for 2024 estimated revenues were, as well as what 2025 was estimated to be. And we had looked back at 23 as well. We also looked at your operation and maintenance costs. So annual for your water and sewer, what was calculated was your annual O&M costs are right at about $310,000 a year. And then for the 2024 rates, we had your totals coming in at $351,000. And for 2025, we had a total of $357,000 estimated revenue. So what you're looking at currently with your customer base, you guys are making about $40,000 a year over what your operation costs are. One of the things that we did not cover last time was what your repair and replacement budget is to go into your budget, or what monies you're setting aside for your CIP projects that are upcoming. So I know that the council was interested in hearing different types of pricing structures for water utilities. So you guys are on a uniform flat rate. That means the customers pay the same amount regardless of the quantity of water used. This is used in unmetered systems. So you guys have a couple different classes of customers. You have your residential, you have some commercial, you have some nonprofit, small commercial, large commercial were called out. And then any other type of pricing structure other than a uniform flat rate is going to require a metered system. So you could do a single block rate, which means customers are charged a constant flow rate, price per gallon or cubic foot, regardless of the amount of water used. And this is often coupled with a base rate for having service available. An example of this is like a $21 a month base rate plus $4.50 per 1,000 gallons used. An advantage of this is an easy to administer and simple to understand system. The cost to the customer is in roughly direct proportion to the amount of water used, and it may encourage water conservation if priced appropriately. Some disadvantages of the single block rate is it may discourage businesses, industries, and institutional customers that use high volumes of water. Another type of pricing structure is a decreasing block rate, which means the flow rate declines as the amount used increases. Each succeeding consumption block rate is less expensive, and the structure on that is based on the assumption that the cost to produce the next gallon declines as consumption goes up. So Radzi, is that a truth in your? Okay, so that is a truth. So the cost of So the assumption that the cost to produce the next gallon declines as water consumption goes up is true for Seldovia. So that also, a decreasing block rate would require meters as well. And then another example of a pricing structure is an increasing block rate. So that means the flow rate increases as the amount used increases. Each succeeding consumption block is more expensive than the last. And that structure is based on the assumption that water rates should promote water conservation and reduce the stress on the system caused by increased demand. Advantages of an increasing block rate: it may promote water conservation, which is important if you have limited water supplies, limited water rights, or systems that are approaching treatment or storage capacity. And that provides water for essential indoor use at a reasonable price and charges a premium to those with discretionary water use. Disadvantages of an increasing block rate include higher costs for high usage may discourage industry from locating in the service areas, and larger households pay higher bills, even if per capita water use is typical for the community. So that's what I have about possible rate structures. So once again, your current uniform flat rate is working and you guys are bringing in more revenue than your costs show per year. If you wanted to change those rate structures other than a uniform flat rate, you guys would need a metered system. And I would like to note that that does include water and sewer rates in your estimated revenues, as well as the O&M costs are for water and sewer as well.
Okay, great. Thanks for that initial discussion there. Appreciate the different options. Heidi or Liz, do you guys have anything additional before we throw it out to council?
Hi, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. And we'll go ahead and open it up to council. If you guys have any initial thoughts, questions, comments on current rate structure or new rate structures.
I guess, Mr. Mayor, I will just state that we did discuss last year going to either a more simplified flat rate or an expanded flat rate. And we didn't really have consensus on that at the time. And so if there's something that the council that sat with the council or you had thoughts on since then that you'd like to pursue as we start talking about the fee schedule, I'd appreciate hearing that so that we have direction on where to go. The rest of the conversation I have is more based on the expenses and budget, so that we'll have time to talk about that rate schedule moving forward. If you see on page, where is it? Here in the packet of the utility rate study, there is examples of other communities. We're kind of in line with those communities. I know we've had rate studies in the past that we are fairly consistent with. So however.
That is page 9, you guys.
Page 9. Yep. So if you look at page 9, Seldovia and other similar communities, sewer and water rates, you'll see Thorn Bay, Saxman, Seldovia, Cake, Kaufman Cove, Pelican and Angoon are a little less. I know Pelican also has less people. So I'm not sure what that looks like for them overall, but we're kind of in the middle there for those rates for residential. So definitely want to bring this back for a bigger discussion, but would love to hear from you guys on if there's specifics that you want to see in that discussion.
Mayor Campbell,
Yeah, go ahead, John.
I'm kind of relieved to see the fact that we have a small surplus anyway above our expenditures. To me, it just means that we have more time to decide what we're going to do and give us a chance to look at this, but good job.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, too, the 40 grand's not, based on what we had happen this year, if you recall some of our instrumentation, it doesn't leave us much for unanticipated repairs and maintenance. So Just want to throw that out there.
And Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead, Vivian.
Yeah. Heidi, if you could refresh my memory from last year's discussion, what did you reference that we were talking about? Make it a base, changing the base numbers to something more simple. Was that like round numbers, or what was that discussion? I don't recall.
Yes, thank you. Through the mayor, and I can send that back out to everybody, the work session packets for that. But we discussed going to like a simplified just residential and just commercial rate, or a flat rate for the whole community, one rate, or going to more of an expanded rate, that like what we used to have, that broke out, restaurants and hotels and the individual services. So there wasn't, if I recall right, there really wasn't consensus, because there's always somebody who's going to get, potentially raw end of the deal.
Right, that's what it was. I was trying to remember what the discussion was. I also am pleased that at least we're in the making some money on this deal. We have some resources, but it's not much. Coming away with $40,000 is not much per year, and that's something we need to think about for what may come up that we don't have money put away with. And we're pretty reasonable. Our fees have been, for only 181 or 200 residents or people paying for the water and sewer for our community, we're doing quite well. And I know it's always a tough one to increase our fees that we have for the small community that we have, and that's something we really need to consider. The other question I had was, it just left my brain. Sorry, I'll get back to it. Yeah, I think it's a discussion we need to have about, but we also are going, every year we're going to add on the, make sure that we're adding on the money, the inflation rate, to make sure that we're covering our tails in that form every year. So that needs to be taken into consideration, if that's $3 or $4 more that people are going to see in their end of the bill. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Vivian.
And if I may, through the mayor, this is Rebecca. Yep. So in that, when you guys are thinking about inflation, think about the increased cost of running the system. Chemicals are increasing, shipping is increasing. And so you guys have to figure all of that in, as well as how old your equipment is and when those individual parts and pieces are going to need to be replaced.
Yeah. Through the mayor, we've had a lot of that in this last year. And so when you talk about a 40,000 surplus, really that's about 13,000 for sewer and about 30,000 for water. And just in this last year, with the one incident, we very easily spent $30,000. So it's not a lot to cover unanticipated expenses.
Yeah, one thing too, I guess, to just bring up, the reason we never have consensus on, going to a different rate structure is because of, our situation in our town where we're so small. We've got very few, typically the businesses are going to take, a fair brunt of it. And because of our seasonality, where we have so many people that leave in the winter, and then we have the businesses are just running at a literal fraction of what they do, in the 3 or 4 months in the summer. So it's tough. It's tough to find a balance. Obviously, with a rate structure that works for everyone. We've discussed meters, what that entails, the cost on that. If those are mechanical meters, how do they get read? If they're a Wi-Fi meter, what's the cost and reliability on that? So yeah, a lot of factors. We've been here many times before. Unfortunately, yeah, this rate structure that we use now seems to work. Somewhat. It's just a matter of figuring out the costs. To make sure that we're covered on a rainy day, and that where we just don't continually, try to bleed out the few people that we have here year round. So that's my thoughts.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead, Ashley.
Out of curiosity, because I know, again, everybody here in this room is probably impacted in a different way, but I know, at least for myself, when I look at the water and sewer bill, when we moved here and I started to look at like what my utilities were, that's the one bill I'm the happiest with myself, because it's the one that I know I can budget for every month. And it's actually my lowest cost utility by far out of any. And I by choice pay a small commercial all year round, even though technically we really don't do much business in the winter time. We say that we're open and we operate. And so I pay that rate as if we're open year round. And I guess that's just my thought was like to support the system since we are here, even though it's just two of us and we're not actually running the lodge. But it is so but I'm just curious if I'm just a like kind of a lone soldier in that, or if for others, if that's the same for you guys as far as the water sewer being your lower cost utility compared to heating oil if you have it, electricity, propane, all the above.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Go ahead. I'm going to reserve my comments
well,
for a few minutes here.
No, I appreciate your thoughts. I definitely appreciate your thoughts, Ashley. And I know for years and years going through this budget, we do have, for the amount of water and the amount of people that are supporting our water and sewer system, we do have very low rates really overall. People hate to see the rates go up, but I am in agreement with you, Ashley. It is one of those bills that you can rely on. You know, it's just under $100 or whatever it might be. If you're a resident, it's $94. And everybody pays the same as far if you leave town or you don't leave town. If you're a resident, you pay the same amount, no matter if you're here or not. And that's something we work with for years and years to make it fair and make sure that community, with everybody who left for the winter, we could still support our system. So I agree. It's one of the rates that it could be disastrous for us if something breaks down big time, but it is one of the rates that is not really that bad. Thank you, Mr.
Yeah, thank you, Vivian. Anyone else?
If I may, Mr. Mayor,
Sure. Go ahead.
or through the mayor, Heidi, do you guys have a variable sales tax rate?
Yes, we do through the mayor.
And what is that?
So we have a seasonal tax rate in the winter. It is 2% for the city and 3% for the borough. And in the summer, it is 6.5% for the city and 3% for the borough.
Okay. I was going to suggest that is another way to increase revenue into the city, but you guys you already have that. It doesn't sound like it's something you would want to increase even further.
It was fairly contentious last go around. And that was in lieu of a property tax increase. So it is working well, though.
It is. And so through the mayor, if you'd like, I can move on to the next portion of the discussion, and that might help with further discussion.
So I got to just chime in one comment. So, yeah, back to Ashley's comments there. I would agree that under normal circumstances, if the water and sewer bills would be palatable, probably in my terms. You know, if I didn't have the electric and fuel bills to go on top of that. So the fuel bill is tough. It's tough for everybody. I get it. I get it. And I don't get it, but I get it. But the fuel bill is tough. Electrical rates are high. And those, to me personally, are for just the hotel. Those are a couple $1,000 a month. So yeah, if I'm only, if I'm down to 300 or 400 for water and sewer, then I'm happy, I guess. But at the end of the day, when I add it all up, I'm just going to say it again. It is killing business to be in business for these rates. So that's all I have. Go ahead, Heidi.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in the work session packet that came out today, you'll also see a memo with from myself along with some examples of what the budget could look like for water and sewer. And this is just focused on expenses, because that's what the other part we talked about is, how can we subsidize or how can we make the burden not so great on our small customer base? And so thinking through the last budget cycle, we made amendments to the FY24 budget and then the council adopted the FY25 budget, and included in that, we shifted away. Well, I should go back. In FY21 to FY22, you can see a big change in our budget. And I left FY21 in here because it'll go away when we move into the budget. But I wanted you guys to see, as particularly in salaries and wages, the shift in this. And I didn't include all of the small revenue, it's all the special revenue funds because I'm not done with them. This is a heavy lift. But for water and sewer, at least, you'll see that in FY21, salaries and wages for water was $58,981. And for sewer, it was $27,449 just for salaries and wages. So the next year nearly doubled for each fund in salaries and wages. And that was with new administration, the fear of the general fund deficit. Those changes were made to allocate more heavily that staff time and expenses to the special revenue funds and away from the general fund. In the FY24 budget amendment and the FY25 budget, if you remember, we had a discussion and determined to actually stop that allocation shift for the larger expenses like the audit and the general liability, and to utilize a fund allocation method based on fund size. So the general fund, of course, is a major fund, and that's the largest one. Water is a major fund. Harbor is a major fund. Sewer was recorded as a major fund, but in just discussion with the auditors in the last couple of weeks, it was discussed that really it can be it qualifies as a non-major fund along with the dock and dock and BHO. So in thinking about, at that time, the audit was split 6 ways just across those funds, a flat split, the general liability, same thing. We went away from that in the FY25 budget and went to split by the size of the actual fund. But what we didn't address, it was personnel. So when it comes to wages and salary and the WTP wages, for instance, I don't know that we're going to get away from those figures because those are actual time that's tracked by those employees. But when it comes to administration, in reviewing the allocation schedule that we've been using for the last several years, it's fairly heavy on the administration side is fairly heavy on water and sewer. So I had a nice discussion with the city clerk and the finance officer, and reviewing my time, sent it forward to Diane's. Each of us had over 20% of our time allocated to both of those funds. Some of us 40% of our time, when that's not the reality. I don't feel like that's fair that we're spending 40% of our time on water and sewer. And really, the majority of time does end up being in the general fund as administration, council, public works. Public works is ginormous and it takes up a lot of our time. Yeah. So with that, I had a suggestion that if you'll see here, what we could do is we could shift some of those back, and it doesn't alleviate the burden. That expense is still there, but potentially if for water and sewer alone, we would look at dock and harbor and BHO as well. If we shifted those allocations, while it's not bringing in additional revenue, what it is doing is it's alleviating some of that burden from the fee users, like our water, sewer, harbor, and putting it back on the tax the tax revenue that we receive in the general fund. If you remember, our general fund is actually fairly healthy now. We've made great gains since having this allocation shift. The police department is no longer an expense. The 2.5 yes, 2% is there for the public works, which is specific to that. So it's not insurmountable for the general fund to take more cost on. And I can explore this further as we move forward, but just an initial view is if you look at page 3, we would be saying 15,000 less from water, 10,000 less from wastewater, and then that 25,523 would hit administration fees under admin. So that is one way that we could alleviate some of that burden. I know it doesn't bring in additional revenues, but it's utilizing what we have. And I'd love to hear more from council on your thoughts about that. The other thing I wanted to note is, yes, I appreciate that Rebecca mentioned that we don't have major maintenance and repair funds coming in at this time. So hopefully, I guess I'm getting a little scattered here. Hopefully, if we were able to do this, any additional funds would be able to then be placed in a major maintenance and repair fund and as reserves. But it doesn't, if you look at the operating budget for each of these in total, the bottom line doesn't actually change the total expenses drastically. It just kind of keeps them stagnant with previous years, because the other thing that's happening is that our general liability went up 22%. Our health insurance went up 10%. We're not expecting as big of jumps this year. Our general liability, we were told it should be under 10% or 10% at the most. Healthcare, I'm still waiting to hear. The audit's still an enormous expense. So those things continue to increase. You'll also see in the yellow that I pointed out, our operating supplies for water on page 5, I kept high at the 12,000 because that shifts year to year. FY24 estimated operating supplies was 7,306. 12,000 for FY25 is right on target. And the big part of that is that we have supplies that have off years, like our polymer is a $2,200 expense per barrel. And every other year we get 2 barrels. So 1 barrel, 2 barrels, 1 barrel, 2 barrels. With that, also our freight remains high. Like I said, the audit fees and insurance and equipment. It appears that we didn't used to allocate equipment charges to these funds. At least 0 is showing in FY21. When that's not the reality, we're tracking what those expenses are. And so you'll see about 5,000 in expenses or less annually for those equipment. And as Rebecca mentioned, as our infrastructure ages, we're buying more parts and more equipment, and there's just more maintenance required for that infrastructure. So I will leave it at that and look for council feedback.
Heidi. It's way too much information. Mr. Mayor, can I have a turn?
Go ahead, Harmony.
Okay, guys. I'm tired. Let me just circle back and clarify so that when somebody asks me, I don't sound like I don't know. So it sounds like when we were going through and trying to spread things out to make sure that we were, balancing our act there. We have since then balanced our act and can now have a more accurate picture of how things can be allocated. So you're potentially putting 25,000 back towards. So does that mean potentially, based off last year's numbers and that reallocation, there's a potential for a $60,000 overage? So if you're not spending 28,000 of it towards administrative, And we're saying that there's already 40 that we're making. In theory, that's 60,000. Is that how that works out?
No, because if you look at the bottom line of those funds, they stay relatively stagnant. So what it's doing is it's saying you can continue with a basic inflation increase and the funds should stay relatively healthy as long as we don't have anything crazily unanticipated, like last year, without having to do any major hikes.
Yeah.
And then it's shifting that burden back onto our tax revenue
Right.
and away from the users.
That's what I was wondering. I'm not, because, you know, I don't have a big hotel or B&B or B&B restaurant, but I do have 4 kids and I have to buy eggs. Like, we're all paying for heating and water and things, and, you know, so everybody has the same concerns. We're all paying for inflationary rates and we all have to take those considerations into account. So, you know, I feel like that's my soapbox here, that I'm a little bit different than everybody else on the council. So, I just, I'm gonna need to be the Bobby Sweat tonight and say, can I come to your office and have you explain this to me better? And I have more brain power to understand it.
Absolutely. Yes.
This last night, I was like, nope. I do agree with our previous discussion and looking at our water and sewer rates, that the way we bill businesses is really confusing. And I could see that it would be really frustrating as a business owner to try and navigate that. I feel like we've done some in recent history to clean that up quite a bit. And I hope that that's helpful to the people who are paying those rates. I do recognize that we need to be putting money aside for those rainy days. But it's a hard choice to make. Nobody wants to charge their neighbors more money. I had a bunch of questions as you were talking and I was getting lost. I did nothing before.
Hey Heidi, quick question. Have we had a filter media replacement yet?
Excellent question. We have not. So that is on Radzy's list, and you will see in here that under let's see, capital projects, I did include 8,900, and that's just for parts this year. And I did not include a figure for media replacement. I think that was what we're looking at, 30,000 for that, Radsy?
Per filter.
Per filter. So, and there's 3. Yeah. So that's something that, you know, we can budget for it, and then it's included in the budget, and then that net effect is then hopefully we're putting that into the reserve account and allocating that out so that we can move forward. Either that, or we're anticipating a net effect, because just like these parts for 8,900, what we're doing is we're drawing down out of our major maintenance and repair fund. So there's a little bit of funds left in each, but we're not putting anything back in them. Particularly, but you will see that the estimated ending fund balance for water is 238,994, and the estimated fund balance for sewer is $126,800. So there are funds there that we can utilize. It's not that we don't have that reserve in the ending fund balance. It's just that it's making sure that we are keeping up as we utilize it. Does that make sense? So,
Mayor Campbell,
Yeah, go ahead, John.
sounds like to me those filters, like everything else I've talked about, need to be on a maintenance plan. Maybe a 6 or 10, 12-year plan.
Mhm.
And they don't all have to be changed at the same time. But I think we need to be changing one this year. Anyway,
Yeah, I would not recommend changing one until it's supposed to be changed. So that
No,
filter media, there's like 5 or 6 different types of filter media in there, and
aren't they 10 years old?
We're coming up on 8 years, I think, 8 or 9
Okay.
years. So, but that was going to be my follow-up question, Heidi. Do you know if the O&M, I can't remember if it says 10 years or 15 years for media replacement? Radzi might know.
I don't remember specific. Look, if you want to give me a couple minutes, I do have the document on my computer. I can look it up.
Yeah, if you've got it, no sweat. It's just for an item of discussion. I mean, we know it's coming, so
Yeah, well,
but yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was not 15 years. I'm pretty sure it was less than that.
Okay, it's likely 10, which is coming real close. So John's probably real accurate in saying sooner than later we're going to have to do that. So
Well, Mayor, all I was trying to do is make everybody aware that it can be done like that, can be planned for. And if she has revenues in those funds, that's what I meant about maybe we should get one out of our way. But absolutely, I encourage the research you're asking for, so we know where we're at and know how to plan properly. I'm done.
yeah, the other caveat on that is and Radzi would be the best one. He's up there every day. There's certain layers that are it's 4 or 5 layers, and they're all different thicknesses of media on there. And then it kind of depends too how efficient our system runs with the backwashes. Every time we backwash, we lose just a tiny little bit of media. Whether it's I don't know if it's a teaspoon or if it's just a couple pebbles of each. You run the air scour and it gets mixed up and it bounces, and then some of it inevitably you lose. So maybe our system's in better shape. I don't know if we need to get, when the time we think it's time, maybe we get a third-party engineer to come down for a day to take a look at it and give us an estimate. Maybe it buys us a couple more years. I don't know. All it is gravel. So it's not like it's some, it's different. Obviously it's different, fancy, gravelly minerals. So, but yep, I know it's expensive. That's all I know.
And Mr. Mayor, I will say we were budgeting it at 30,000, but we did recently talk with our circuit rider, and he mentioned doing something similar in a project in another small community, and I think he said theirs was about 40,000 to replace one. It was pretty high.
Just one, yes.
Just one. Yeah.
I believe it was 37.
Mr. Mayor,
Okay.
if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
So another thing that's just popped into my head as far as like planning, because we're looking at things for, our 2025 and then 2026. And in my head, I'm thinking 5 years ahead. And we also are going to have potentially a big change on the sewer end of things for expenses. And so what I would propose is kind of plant the seed in your guys' heads is devising a plan. I think 5 years is a good future you can see where we can look at projecting things such as inflation costs. Obviously, we still don't really know what the costs are going to be on that sewer end, but knowing there's going to be costs. So maybe coming up with some ideas of what we could potentially see as incurred costs coming in that time. In addition, we're wanting to build these maintenance funds. And so coming up with a plan of what does that need to look like in increments, 5 years from now, how much would need to be there, and then breaking that out and starting with looking at if all we could do is raise rates, what would that look like? And then trying to come up with plans on other ways of subsidizing that. But that way we can even propose that out to the public to let them know we're working on other ways of subsidizing, but these are costs we know are going to be coming up that things are going to have to be raised. So this is potentially in 5 years what your rate will look like, just like they're doing on businesses for raising minimum wage and things like that. So it's not this surprise. And I know I mentioned that when we were talking about the sewer treatment plant or the retention pond, and that we have to plan for the costs of maintaining that, staffing it later, and making sure that we're not waiting until then. And I think it really does us a lot of good. It keeps us thinking about it on the forefront, keeps you guys thinking, but also so we're not surprising anybody that in 5 years, whether they're, in business trying to make plans, people trying to move here or just live here.
And through the mayor, if I may add on to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the RFP for the planning project is getting ready to, I did see a draft of it, is getting ready to go out next month. And then there will be 2 RFPs for designs for each of those projects, one for the sewer treatment lagoon and one for the sewer improvement project in the slough. And I'm not sure if it's part of the design process, but it's definitely a part of the construction process, as we are actually required to have a business plan. So those engineers will help us with that and provide what that inflation and rate schedule should look like in order to meet those costs. So we will have professional help to sort that out as we move
That's
forward.
great. So maybe that's even just something for a plan for next year as we're going through the budget process of trying to come up with a 5-year plan. So this year, looking at what we've done, still trying to find ways to subsidize, but I think erring on the worst end in the planning sense and communicating so that hopefully we can make that look better along the way.
Through the mayor, if we do go with this different allocation rate, which I would recommend, I was very conservative with these initial costs, and a lot of them are going to stay the same. The operating supplies, that shift, the equipment, the repairs, maintenance, those kind of things. But there are I guess what I'm trying to say is we're trying to keep costs as low as possible. And this is definitely weighing heavy on my mind, that I think that we can work through this process this year for FY26 and then maybe refine it a little bit more for FY27. That's the hope. But this is definitely an initial start.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead, Vivian.
Good thoughts coming out. I am in favor of us, the council, working with the reallocation of the funds from the general fund to cover the issue of water and sewer, and reallocating in, as our city manager just said earlier, that the amount of time they're spending with water and sewer is perhaps not accurate. So that's one way we can see some reform. The other thing is, Ashley hit the nail on the head. When the water treatment plant was being designed, the council's job at that time, we spent 5 years making smaller increments to the water and sewer bill to cover what we thought was going to be all the costs attributed to the water treatment plant. That's the same thing, I think, what needs to happen with the sewer treatment plant when that comes around. So all of those things would be lined up for the public not to be hit all at once. And the way we did it with water, it turned out to be okay. Everybody lived through it, and we're receptive to the idea of I think it was about over 5 years that we had the increment raises on the water and sewer. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Vivian. Yeah, that was something that we all decided to do years ago when we were faced with that dilemma, and we knew it was going to be a big hit. We did the same thing. We had the rate study, we had everything, and we knew we were way underfunded, and decided to take that out. Put that those rate increases out over a number of years, rather than 1 or 2 years, and that. It was a good way to go. I mean, at the end of the day, it was better than the alternative of everybody getting whacked, one time, heavily in 1 year. So that would be definitely something. I agree with Vivian on that one, that is something we should keep in the toolbox also. Heidi, along those lines too, one other thought, and I mean, short-term memory loss here. So our surplus now, our sales tax surplus that goes to the Public Works MMR, right? Is that where that money sits? I can't remember where that sits at the end of the year.
So we do have a dedicated sub account in our AMLIP account, our AMLIP fund, that we transfer those revenues into. But no, technically they are payable to the general fund.
Okay. So that is something else too. And so we, remind me again now too, based on what we all discussed multiple times and came up to the final conclusion with, is that based on the lawyer's recommendations and everything else, that money is not accessed until the lease is up, or are we accessing any of that now?
We're not accessing any of it currently. However, it was a council decision to discuss that annually, to determine if there was, a desire to start utilizing those funds and then just saving. There's three ways you can go. You can start utilizing the funds, and then we continue to make those payments annually after we receive more revenue, or you can wait and save up all the funds until you have the amount that you need, and then utilize and save that amount while we continue to make the lease payments, and then utilize additional funds, or save up until you have enough to finish the lease payment and pay that off. And I anticipate that we'll be able to do that after FY26. So
no, all things are looking good on that. So that was just one thought too, that when the time comes, if we wanted to look at them, certainly water and sewer fall under the auspices of Public Works. So, I mean, we could, also allocate or dedicate a percentage of that going forward to, to help with water and sewer. I mean, the thing is that is not going to go away at the end of the day. Those funds are going to be needed to take care of our basic infrastructure in Seldovia, whether we like it or not. It's just how it's going to have to be. So unless someone's got a, magic rabbit in their hat.
Through the mayor.
Yep.
That reminds me of three things, if you don't mind. While that 2% is specific to Public Works, so I don't think you could utilize it for water and sewer. The Public Works is a huge portion of the general fund, and you could earmark an additional unearmarked amount to water and sewer like we do for Public Works, and that would probably be fine. Secondly, I wanted to state that I did receive a letter from DCRA that our community assistance funding that we've been utilizing for revenue replacement at this is 20,000 less for FY26. So from 75,000-ish to 50,000-ish. For the community assistance program. So we will be losing that 20,000 in revenue for the general fund. And then I had a third, but I just blanked it. So I apologize for that. But yes, there is a way that if you guys wanted to earmark a portion of that sales tax to water and sewer, absolutely that could be done. I would caution utilizing the Public Works one and keeping that for Public Works. But that's a really large part of the general fund, so I don't think that'll be an issue.
Yeah, that was more for concept discussion. So yeah, however we got to do it to possibly entertain that. So. Anyone else? Yep. Go ahead.
I got a little bit more. I appreciate, Heidi, your thoughts on the reallocations, and I kind of like that on a short term. Has all of the chief of police budget been reallocated, or is there still some of that sitting around?
So excellent question through the mayor. That part of that net balance is those additional funds that aren't being spent for police. The council did elect to
save.
put 50,000 in a reserve account in the last budget. So that has been done. If there's an additional amount that you want to put in, we can look at that for this budget. Just if you want to let me know what you're thinking. But there is 50,000 set aside, and then that whole net balance at the end of the general fund is all the revenue received versus the expenses.
Yeah, I was merely just asking for reference and what other things we could look at when we get down to the nitty gritty here. Where else we could find money from, and I had something else, but I forgot now, so maybe it'll come to me.
Anyone else? We have anybody signed up tonight, Liz, online to speak?
We do not, Mr. Mayor.
Well, we have a number of things that we discussed tonight, number of options in front of us. And Heidi, when I don't have the calendar in front of me, water and sewer is going to be, what month or meeting are we anticipating that piece of the budget coming up for further discussion?
So Mr. Mayor, that's really up to you guys. We'll probably need a standalone work session for it to discuss the fee schedule rates. And maybe we look at a little bit later in April. We don't want to go too far out because the budget needs to pass in May. I'll look at the schedule, I guess is what I have to say. I remember what I was going to, no, I don't. It keeps floating in and out of my brain. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, one more challenging question. Do you recall the last time that we had an increase outside of the CPI? It's been at least 2 or 3 years now, I think, when we've just done CPIs. I don't recall how long it's been since we actually had a dedicated increase.
It's been a while, but I can present a scenario for you guys. We will know the CPI on the 12th, March 12th. So 2 days here is what we're waiting on. And then of course we're waiting for the liability insurance and the health insurance totals. But what we can do is once we know that CPI, we could do a breakout of just the inflation or what it would look like for other scenarios.
If you can just include when the last time we was and maybe what the last few increases were, just for discussion's sake, so we have it in front of us.
Okay. And then is there any specific rate structures that you guys would like to see as part of that discussion?
I don't know if anybody's got any desire to make any changes to what we currently have right now.
Mr.
Most
Mayor,
likely. Yep. Go ahead, Jack.
maybe I have a question, but on this rate change, I think we need to identify what our fixed costs are and what our operating costs are. And if you, in all fairness, like to Ashley and Harmony, people that if you put water meters in and here with John or yourself, you're using more water, you pay for it. But I think to find some formula that we can have a minimum hookup fee, and then whatever our operating costs are, then we have to charge accordingly based on a water meter. And then right now in the administration we have, as far as inflation proofing, I don't know where it's going to go. I mean, that's anybody's guess. And so things that you could do in the past to base it on 10%, I don't know if that's going to hold true. And so in a year from now, we could be not even close. That's all I have.
Yeah, and that's typically why we try to wait until we get that posted or published CPI out, and then we'll go off of that to try to keep us as current as we can. So that definitely works. But yeah, no, we, understanding our operational costs, fixed costs. I think we got a pretty good idea on those on the breakout. I don't know if you've had a chance to take a look at that. But yeah, this is every year it seems to be that we get in pretty detailed. It's just no one wants more increases, even when we know we got to do them.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say, like for Harmony or residents that they're not in business, a business will use more water. They have a way to adjust their revenue where a fixed income person or whatever that they don't have it. They're whatever the rate is what it is. So based on a water meter, they pay for the usage, and a commercial business is going to pay for the usage as well, even though it might be considerably higher. But they can do sales tax and things. We can adjust for some of that. But residents don't have that option.
Okay.
If I may chime in one thing, because I just remember when we talked about this last time, one time ago, we were talking about what water meters would do. We actually had because I think Jen was still on council then too. We had a few folks speak up that are on residential that actually said that if there was a water meter, they would probably end up paying more than some of the business rates. So just kind of, yeah, to kind of put that out there that.
Totally. Like I have 6 people in my house, but I don't flood the street to break dust down. I don't wash my car 3 times a week. We have rain barrels. Like I have a lot of people in my house. I probably use the same 365 days in a year that some people use in 60 days in their summer home. So I can agree that we do need to move towards that meter rate just so that it holds every household accountable, and it's fair for, Jeremiah has a building that has, 15 rooms. I'm not sure, but how many of those rooms are being utilized right now? 2. Right. Exactly. Yeah. So it's not reasonable to say that he should be paying. I agree with you. My comment earlier was that, we're all in the same situation of inflation and those types of costs. We all have to take those things into consideration. So while I'm not paying a business rate like most of my fellow council members here, I too feel the rising cost of existing. So I agree with you, Jack. A meter rate going forward is.
Yeah, and that's what's important to identify the fixed cost and your operating costs. So in all fairness, with a water meter, you can control it. I mean, if you want to leave the lights on in your house, so be it, you pay for them. But if you want to live in the dark, that's your choice as well. And so I think that if we could establish those 2 rates, and now we can say our operating costs are this, then you take all your hookups and you say, okay, we've got a fixed cost here of so much, and we got 200 residents, and we got to have a minimum charge per resident just to be online. Okay, then it goes on for that with the water meter, and then you can adjust for it, whatever you. I mean, if you look at the Anchorage municipality, we're on water meters. I mean, most larger cities charge.
Really quick, what is the upfront cost of the installation of that system? It's a pretty big. Is that already in here? And I just didn't see it. Yeah.
For meters through the mayor. So the last time we explored this was, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And I believe at the time it was around $100,000, but I can go back and look at it.
Mr. Mayor,
That's the other piece of it too, is Yes, the rates are going to be fair after we pay it off. Until then, haha.
You have to pay for your own water meter.
Is an
Yeah,
option,
there's a
through
couple.
the mayor, is that can be included in the ordinance that as new buildings and structures go up, that they have to install a meter, and that cost could be
for tomorrow.
to those customers. However, it doesn't account for the cost to the city to be able to read those meters and operate the system.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead, Vivian.
Yeah. The council's had the discussion about meters for a long time. So I think it's, it was always the price of installing the meters, which was going to be a large factor. And then also the conversation was just what Councilmember Jack was saying. And that was, how do we what are the charges going to be per gallon? And some of our estimations that we came up with, some people are going to be paying more than what they were currently. So it's a big discussion that we need to work on. But I think if you bring to council, Heidi, what the costs are of the meters, it will either lend a discussion or close the discussion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, Vivian, I think along with that, Heidi, too, you could run a few extrapolations, like Harmony was alluding to, and Jack, that, if you've got a business, yeah, our high use is going to be obviously for, 4 months in the summertime, and then it's going to be pretty much dead for the rest of the year. But agreed, yeah, there has to be a minimum charge, to keep our system up and running. And then, if you're wasteful on water, yeah, it's going to cost you, it's going to cost you a few more dollars. If you're conserving, then it's going to cost you less. So, yeah, on the initial discussion, it sounds great. If we can figure out the dollars, or a solution, how to come up with the meters, with the initial install. I mean, they're not too terribly, it's not too terribly complicated to get the meter installed. It's just, whether or not, I'm sure they make a Wi-Fi version, they mechanical versions. So there's a couple different ways to look at it. Maybe we only actually read them once every 3 or 4 months, and you do an estimate the other months, and then you true up quarterly, or you true up semi-annually or something. So definitely some options to think about, going forward.
Mr. Mayor, I have another question.
Sure.
Sorry. I'm full of them today. This is what you get when I come into the meeting. So as far as water meter, like the cost of installation, I know that this is, as we've all alluded to, this is something that comes around pretty frequently. Is staff kind of have that like on the back of their minds as they're looking at different grants and funding opportunities, potential funding sources for updating a water system in that way, like a cost match?
Through the mayor, yes and no. Staff does have it on the back of their minds because this is a discussion that's not constantly, but regularly coming up. However, we are not pursuing or looking for those opportunities because it hasn't been prioritized by the council.
So let's say that this budget season here, over the next 6 meetings, somewhere in that time frame, we're going to discuss this. And it sounds like everybody kind of agrees that this is something we need to consider and pursue. So instead of saying for FY26, we're implementing a $400 cost to the 200 residents who pay for this service, we say we are looking at updating our infrastructure. This is what we already know based off what we spend, what our facility costs. This is what we need. And we go with that small rise of cost just once a year, small amount to put by towards that 400, while still looking for some sort of supplemental funding with an end date of 4 to 5 years from now. Like, because we have to, as you say, have a projected budget. Everybody needs that. we have to account for the rising costs, but you can't be just dumping that huge financial burden on your private or your business. So I'm just restating what everybody else here has said, but am I on the right track of what we're kind of saying here? I'm summarizing for myself. I'm getting weird looks and I can't understand what your faces are telling me. So
My weird look is
you're-
probably because I'm not in favor of meters. I think maybe my comment came across the wrong way. I was more saying that the impact on a lot of the private citizens, because their rates are much lower,
yes,
could be what would be detrimental of having the meter system. When we started to actually have the conversation of how much water usage there is, even if you're looking at like different households of having different amounts of bathrooms or different things, and
Yeah.
that's where I look at that, because it is yes, it's hard to run a business here, but it's also hard to just live here for families, and the amount of folks that we have, that whether they have large families right now
or a
they're
mansion.
or they're on fixed incomes, and that's where as Jack said, businesses, we do have the ability. I mean, there's a lot happening right now that we're having to try to account for inflation. There's only so much we
And I
can
think
do.
that's in Harmony's case,
Mhm.
you know, it's like people on a fixed income, they don't really have any choice if inflation goes
Right.
up. They only have so much money, and so a business.
Yeah. I just
a
would-
few of us around here, you can compensate that by raising your prices where
Mhm.
they don't have that
Yeah.
option.
And that's why I want to be careful with meters, because in that discussion, what I was trying to bring up is that we came to the conclusion, it seems, we don't know for certain, but the
I mean,
consensus
if you
was
wanna
that,
get an extreme, let's just say I owned a car wash and was all on a fixed rate, and then I'm using
Yeah.
100 times more water than you guys are, you know, so you pay for what you use, basically.
Yeah.
I would just hate to see
But this-
families and
Based
Well, and our
see-
elder.
and our elders
Hardship.
affected all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's a
Because-
big consideration, and
And I would say, because when I compare the rate of like what I pay as a small commercial to what I paid for just two of us that were hardly ever at our house in the Seattle area, it's the same on a meter. And so that's why I think of that. And then I think of what a metered rate would do to those families here. It would probably be a really scary reality. So I think the way we have it does help spread it out, the sharing better. And so I just wanted, because once we go that way,
you can't go back.
go back. That's my only, so I wanted to clarify that. I was like, that's not where I was at.
Yeah, no, that's
Not that I'm not like open to discussion about it, but currently
Sure.
that's my thought.
okay.
No, and Ashley's 100. Go ahead, Jack.
Having water meters, it gives you another level of protection in water usage. So some of these people that are maybe gone, and I think electronically they can read the meters nowadays. So you don't have to have a physical person. But let's just say like the house that I had Rick in, the pipe come apart, he wasn't here. Fortunately, I seen water running down the street, but that water meter, if you had a leak somewhere, it'll show up, it's out of line somewhere. So it gives you a little insight of what's going on. You can monitor it.
I think it's interesting. I know that I myself need to do some more research on this specific topic. And if I could take the beautiful information you guys presented and bring it to you, and you can do some interpreting for me because you're better at numbers than I am. I think it's a really hard truth to navigate because there's a lot of moving parts here. We live in a beautiful place. I have one toilet and 5 people, but I know that there's a building down the thing that has 5 toilets and 2 people, plus the rotating friends. And like, we're all paying the same, but where's the usage coming out of? My mom is paying the same rate that I'm paying, using 1/10 of what I'm using. So it's like, but yeah. It's hard math.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think a spreadsheet and running some numbers and some extrapolations on there would be a good place to start. And I agree with Ashley. I think you might see in actual usage, you might see a reality check for larger families that are here year round in terms of, gallons. So, and again, maybe the gallons aren't you've got X amount that we spend, you've got X amount that we bring in now. Maybe the formula is that that monthly charge is, maybe the monthly charge is 3/4 of what it is. That's the minimum. Maybe the minimum charge is 3/4 of what we're paying now, and the rest of it is based on actual usage. You just have to play with the numbers to see what the formula looks like, and at the end of the day, if it makes sense.
I have one other thing just to think about when I'm thinking about what might happen with meters in our climate in the winter, and the encouragement at certain times to keep some water running, so that we don't have frozen pipes. And I know there was a couple times this year that I had to do that in some areas to make sure that we didn't run into issues. And that's one of those things that then people think twice because, well, I don't want my bill to go up, but then all of a sudden we might have other problems from not, depending on, because we have a lot of old infrastructure. And so you don't want people to not do that and then have frozen pipes and bursts and issues. And then we have more water going out.
And through the mayor, if I may.
Yeah, absolutely.
It sounds like what you guys are talking most about is the single block rate idea, where customers are charged a base rate every month and then per usage after that. And I think that makes a lot of sense for this community. And meters do protect the water system itself because they will catch leaks. They will catch people that are using too much water. And then that base rate monthly, even for folks who aren't here because they're hooked up to the service, that keeps your system up and funded and running.
All right. Well, good productive discussion, you guys. We kind of came full circle on a number of things. So obviously lots of items to consider here in the next few months, trying to understand, what direction we want. I don't think we're going to solve it, obviously, this budget cycle, but certainly I agree with some of the comments or most of the comments that we do need to have a plan going forward here over the next couple of years. Nothing happens overnight. So if we decide to move forward with that single block system, use system, then yeah, maybe if that's what we decide, and we do our homework and run the numbers, it makes sense for everybody, then we look to see what we have to do to fund it and get it implemented. So yeah, good discussion, everyone. Any final closing thoughts, comments before we wrap this one up before our main meeting here tonight? All right. Well, if there's nothing else, thanks to the council staff. Thanks you guys for coming in, Rebecca. Appreciate all the information and the packet, the numbers and everything, and your insight. And then I'm sure we'll be reaching back out with you guys and working with you to find out where we inevitably go on this. So, all right, if there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and adjourn the work session, and then I'll see everybody back here in about 15 minutes, and we'll get on to our regular meeting tonight. We don't have a huge agenda for that, but we'll get on to that meeting here in about 15 minutes. And we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Mayor.
Because Jordan isn't here, there's no coffee made. Coffee.